Hey everybody, it's Easter Sunday and we're back with our fourth official Dawn Rosa live stream. I don't know if we have any viewers yet, but we'll start anyway. As usual, I'm Jano, I'll be your host tonight and as always. And let me quickly introduce at first to all our Dawn Rosa social media where you can follow us. So the main page is Facebook. That's facebook.com/DonRosaOfficial. There's also a discussion group where you can chat with other fans and with Don himself. That's facebook.com/groups/DonRosaOfficial. We're on Twitter. That's @DonRosa. We're on Instagram. That's @DonRosa. And as usual, doing our live streams, let me quickly direct you to our Ko-fi page where you can support us if you like these sessions and want to see more in the future, because with your help we'll be able to update our services and offer you better quality each time. That is Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/DonRosa. And now let me introduce the man himself. Here is the man, the myth, the motion picture in your computer. Here is Don Rosa. Good evening, Don.
Come on. It's afternoon here.
Good afternoon, Don.
Here's what we're doing now. Hey Kids Comics. Wholesome Comics Entertaining. Wholesome Comics Entertaining. We're in the comics vault this time, which is where I like to be. Well, I'll just put this down here. This is my comic collection that I started in 1962, 63, when I was 11 years old. Everything's in alphabetical order, arranged by company, and I had collected until about the late 80s. And then a friend of mine convinced me that if I wasn't interested in those comics of the 70s and 80s, he'd sell them for me. So I said, here, take them. So now there's only my comic collection here up until 1970, and they go back to, say, World War II. The end of World War II. That is when, according to comic book collectors, at least 20 or 30 years ago, we had the Golden Age, which was up to well, in those days, it was up to 1945. And then we had the Atomic Age, sort of an unfortunate name for after the atomic bomb, I guess, from 46 to 1956. Now they call that all the Golden Age, which I think is a grotesque misnomer, because the comics before the end of World War II and the comics after the end of World War II were totally different. Absolutely, completely different comics. But anyway, then they, most collectors now say the Silver Age started in 1956 and went to 1970. And then came what they call the Bronze Age, which to me is when Marvel-style superheroes took over the industry in America, and I lost interest in it, and that's why I sold all those. Not to say there weren't some really nice comics after that, but they were going in the wrong direction in general, and I had to decide to stop at a certain year. If I didn't, I'd say, well, I'll get rid of all these, but yeah, I'll keep that one. I like that one. Like Mike Kaluta's Shadow, I'll keep that one. And then I'd say, well, if I'm going to keep that one, I'll keep Howard Chaykin stuff. And well, if I'm going to keep those, I'll keep Mike Blues. And then if I'm going to keep, so I'd keep it all. So I had to just stop 1970. And the things like I just mentioned that I still liked, I get the reprint collections of them. So anyway, the reason I like to do the live streams here, now, of course, I'm here to answer any questions on any topic that anybody wants. I assume about my so-called career, ducks and whatnot. But what I really enjoy doing is having a chance to show off this collection, which I never am able to. So I love to do, in between the questions that Jano is going to select from what's being sent in, we're going to try to do the comic book challenge once more. Now, what we do there is somebody send in to Jano so he can see it on the scroll, the most obscure and virtually unknown comic book published in America from, like I say, roughly 1945 to 1970. And I'm going to produce it for you, no matter how obscure it is, because it's somewhere in this room. Now, a couple of basic rules. Rule number one is you can't name a comic that I don't have. And there are certain genres that I don't have. So, but I think they're pretty easy to remember. First of all, I don't have any romance comics, because those are for girls. And by the way, you can read this long spiel that I gave about the rules of the game. It's on both of the Facebook pages. I'm just trying to remember the basics here because Jano and I both know nobody ever reads that stuff. So we'll save a lot of time and unfair or illegal challenges being sent in. So I'll quickly try to remember everything I wrote in that long text. So no romance comics, no Archie comics, no teen humor. Those are also for girls, I always thought. And there's a lot of fans who like those, but they look. There's no funny animal comics or toddlers comics. Funny animal, obviously, Marx's ducks aren't funny animals, but there's lots of other funny animals like Bugs Bunny and Porky Pig. Now those I've got. I don't have any funny animal comics except Dell, which would I think be like 90% of them right there, because Dell was the biggest publisher of comics in American history, and they had all of the licensed, not just Disney, but they licensed all of the animated cartoon funny animals. So I don't have any funny animals except Dell and DC. Probably even Americans nowadays, modern collectors, don't know how many funny animal comics DC published back in the 50s when they were the most popular comics. They had more funny animals than they had anything else, more than the superheroes, more than the westerns, more than. So when we're on that subject, just about any Dell comic, back to World War II, is fair. And any DC comic back to World War II, up to 1970, is also fair, except the romance comics. Let's see, I don't have any war comics except DC and EC, but DC war comics, that's probably more than half of the war comics published. I don't have any westerns except the Marvel Atlas, and DC. So that's a lot of them. I wish I had the Fawcett's. Those I miss. I'd like to start a collection of those. What's left? Like I say, you need to go to the web page and read the rules. But besides that, I say that any adventure, superhero, jungle, science fiction, horror, mystery, what else? And like I say, just about any DC or Dell, and almost every single Marvel Atlas since World War II, I've got in this room somewhere. And your challenge is to name one that I don't have. You name an issue number, something obscure, and give me a, don't just say number one, let's say like number 37. And I'm going to jump up out of that chair as best I can with my big toe that I think I broke last night falling off the deck. But I'm doing okay. And I'm going to dash over here and locate it as quick as I can and bring it over here and take it out of the box and show it to the camera if I've got it. And I think I will. Well, this doesn't matter now, but there were like, I don't know, what, 20 or 30. I went back and looked at all the comments to the last time we were in the room here, the first live stream, and I looked at all the comments of the comic book challenges, rather, and they were all excellent. Jano doesn't know which ones to read because he's not an American. He doesn't, know which is a good choice and what is an unfair choice. So on the website, I listed all those. If somebody like some European wants to give me a challenge, but they don't know what kind of comic to name, since they don't know American comics, you can just pick one off the list and challenge me with that. So everybody can play. And I don't have all the ones on that list. So you can catch me that way. Well, I don't know. Jano, does that, shall we start? Should we
Should
start
we?
with comic book challenge and then go on to questions, or just go
I
on to?
think so, because as long as you're standing there anyway, we can look for some comic books, I think.
All right, just one challenge at a time, and then some questions, and then Jano's the director. He's going to decide when to give me a challenge.
Okay, somebody
All right.
already sent in one. I have no idea if it's a valid one, but you decide. Um, he says, challenge. I bet Don does not have Forbidden Worlds 73 from 1958.
Forbidden Worlds.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's right here. Here we go. Hold on. Now, let's see how this camera works. Forbidden Worlds. Here's the number. I got to zoom in. Can you see that, Jano?
The...
Right here.
Ah, yes, I think we see it, yes.
Excellent challenge.
And it seems to be the first appearance of Herbie Popnecker.
Oh, okay. Well, we're not going to look it up. You can Google that somewhere. But there it is. Excellent condition. Well, it's got some wrinkles. You know, not all my comics are in perfect condition. I don't want them to be. That's not why I've got them. I just want them to be nice. Like the original owner had respect for them and took care of them. Okay, now I have to waste time and put these away because at the end of the show, I don't want to, stacks of comics on the table.
Okay, maybe in the meantime you can answer another question from someone, comic book related. He asks, hi, what are the differences between the Golden Age and the Atomic Age?
The Golden Age was, may I be seated? The Golden Age started in 1933 with Famous Funnies. Am I right? I think the first issue of Famous Funnies, which was reprints of newspaper strips. And that's why they were called comics. They're all funny newspaper strips. But then it went on to the late 30s, just reprints of newspaper strips. And then, was it DC Comics? They started because they couldn't get the rights to the newspaper strips, so they created their own comics. A new idea. They created comic books. And it was several years into that period when they finally created Superman, and then a year later Batman. But that started, the first heroic age is a better name. Who was it? Jerry Bales decided that. Well, he would have thought that those early years were the golden age too. I don't see them as the golden age. It was hack work. They had lots of great ideas, obviously, because they're still going on today. Superman and Batman and many other ideas. But the artwork was not especially good because all the artists wanted to be working in the newspapers. That's where there was money. There was no money in comic books. There still isn't to some degree, except for just a few. So then the only kind of comics there were superhero comics and humor comics. But most of them were superhero comics, adventure comics, and still lots and lots of newspaper reprints. Those lasted until the mid-50s. And then there were hardly any Westerns. There were some crime comics. There were no horror comics. There were no... the Disney comics, Mark started in 1942 with brand new, even the Disney comics had been all newspaper reprints. So that was Dell Comics, part of Western Publishing. They hired this guy named Carl Barks to create new Donald Duck stories just for the comic books. But let's see, there was no horror. There was Planet Comics. Was only one science fiction comic. There might have been a couple of others. But then some people can say that it was at the end of World War II, when the soldiers came home looking for work. These were people who grew up on the early comics. They liked them, even if they were hack work. They loved them and they respected them. And that's when these people got into the workforce. And that's when what I think is the true golden age of American comics, which we call the Atomic Age, started in 1946 to 1956 is pretty good, 1960. Those are the best years of American comics. That's, for one thing, that's when you had Karl Barks's best years, and that's when you had EC Comics. But in those years, what you had, the superheroes died out, except for DC, and Quality kept a couple of they had Black Hawk, not really a superhero comic, but falls in that same area. And of course, they had Plastic Man, one of the most famous superhero creations of the 40s, who's still around today. I guess DC owns it now because they bought out Quality, the same way they bought out Fawcett and got Captain Marvel. But now the kind of comics we had dominating the 50s were they were all that's when Archie was popular. Funny Animals were the most popular. Science fiction comics, horror comics. This is through the 60s also, the Silver Age. We started talking about in 1956. That's when the DC brought back the superheroes. But lots of these other comics still continued. What we had it was like being in Europe. European comics, everything. Everybody read comics. You had romance comics, Casper the Dead Baby comics. You had Richie Rich comics. You had Western comics out the wazoo. Americans don't even know what a Western comic or a Western movie is. You'd have to go to Germany or Italy or someplace to see a Western. What else? Just every hot rod comics, every possible genre of comics. I don't have any hot rod comics. But that's the difference. That was that's the way comics were starting after World War II, and of course after 1956, the horror comics disappeared. But you still had lots of science fiction and mystery, strange stories like Forbidden Worlds. That was an excellent series of. They were never horror comics or mystery, like Twilight Zone episodes. But then in 1970 is when comics started to fail, and the only way they could be saved was to turn everything into a superhero comic, because those sold to people who would buy every issue. And but we talked about that previous stream. Okay, you'll notice my answers get too long, but I think have I covered the difference between comics in before 1945 and after 1946 up to 1970?
I think so. Okay, we have another question, more general one.
Okay.
Would Don like to tell us which comics or series is his favorite, or the one he's most proud of owning?
Most proud of owning? Well, of course, my favorites are Karl Barks's Uncle Scrooge, but I don't think those are the best comics ever published. How can I say that? I prefer a funny adventure, a funny, historically accurate, intelligent adventure comic, and Uncle Scrooge. And that's why, because I grew up loving Uncle Scrooge comics. Now, and again, I say this repeatedly, the best comics ever published were between 1950 and 1956. EC Comics, right here. You can't see them, they're just off screen, but I keep them close. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes of comics. Best comic books ever published anywhere. And they were horror comics. Oh, grisly horror comics. Excellent crime comics. What else? Piracy comics. Well, that's where Mad magazine started, as Mad Comics. So they had several other comedy comics. Brilliant. These were the people who came back from the war and they loved comics, and somehow they all wound up at one company. that was run by Bill Gaines. His father, Max Gaines, had started some of the earliest comic books back in the early 30s. And he had died, and Bill Gaines owned the company now. And he hired all of these 20-year-old hotshot writers, and or actually just artists. He had mainly one writer, Giselle Feldstein. And so he wrote almost all the stories for all of these, the war comics. I'll read the title since they're right here. Crime suspense stories. That's all one word, suspense stories. Frontline combat. They had Two-Fisted Tales was another war comic. And these were war comics that were anti-war comics. Try to conceive of that. Plus, they would always, especially Two-Fisted Tales, would have historically accurate war fiction, or even truthful stories of Civil War or Battle of Troy. Haunt of Fear. It's one of my favorite comic book titles of all. Haunt of Fear. They probably had the best 3 horror comic titles in the business. The next box is Mad and Panic. That was their other humor comic. And then, let's see, Shock Suspense Stories. Tales from the Crypt. Two-Fisted Tales, The Vault of Horror. These have been made into movies back in, I think, the 70s. They had The Vault of Horror and Tales from the Crypt. They never made a Haunt of Fear series, but they used stories out of the Haunt of Fear comics. What's next? Weird Fantasy and Weird Science. The 2 best science fiction comics ever. Ray Bradbury wrote stories for these comic books. That's about it. Then they had New Direction when comic books got such bad publicity because of all the horror comics that imitated the EC comics were dreadful. I've got them all. I claim to have them all. If you want to challenge me, every horror comic ever published, except some smart aleck in the last challenge named one I don't have. I don't remember if it got on that list. Well, he can name it again, and I'll show that I don't have it. I could have it, but I'm not going to pay like $10,000 for it. I could have had it for $1 back in 1970. But EC then changed direction, and they tried to do comics for adults. And this was not only before its time. It was too European an idea to work in America. They had piracy comics, which were they kept Two-Fisted Tales, and these were authentic, historically accurate stories of war. They had, get this one, psychoanalysis comics, where you just had stories of a psychiatrist sitting with a patient and discussing his life. That's it. But things like that. Anyway, those are my, I guess I'm proudest to own them because I think they're fabulous. Right.
Okay, another question. What does Don do with his collection these days? Is he still collecting things he doesn't have?
Well, it's hard to find things I don't have. Actually, I got 2 last week. I'll try to remember what they were. Off eBay last week, I got a Prize Comics Western number 86. It's one I didn't have. There's maybe 4 other. Prize Comics was a comic published starting in the early 40s from Prize Comics. That was they named their company after their first comic book. But they published, it's not a huge publisher, but they had Prize Comics, which had superheroes. And then after World War II, since superheroes weren't selling anymore, they turned that into Prize Comics Western. And so that's when I pick up. I've got all the Prize Comics Westerns. And number 86 was one that I didn't have. I've got it now, so you can name it. But there's 4 or 5 others that I don't have. They're scarce. They're hard to find. Actually, they're the later issues, right before they went out of business. I guess they stopped selling, like in the mid-50s. So those are difficult to find. And I got one other. Oh, yes. It was a DC comic. One of the only DC comics that I didn't have like I said, I have all of the DC comics except the romance. Oh, and the teen humor things like DC had Buzzy and A Date with Judy and a couple of other Archie type comics. Just a few. Binky, they had Binky. It's like 3 or 4 titles. But there was one. They had 2 comics based on popular movies and music. And this was aimed at, I guess it was probably aimed at girls, movie fans and music fans, well, maybe boys too. And one of them, the one for the movie fans, was Miss Beverly Hills of Hollywood. There was 9 issues of that. I claim to have all 9. And the other one only lasted 3 issues, was Miss Melody Lane of Broadway. And that's about the music business. And Beverly Hills, that was her name, was trying to become a movie actress, a movie star. And Melody Lane was trying to become a Broadway star. So I needed another. It was only 3 Miss Melody Lanes, and they're very scarce. And I finally bought one. I won't tell you which one. Well, now you should. Don't name that one, because now you know it's. If you name it, the chances are 66% in your favor that I'm not going to have it, because I've only got one. But those are 2. I'll show you some more. Right here. These are comics that I recently upgraded, and that's not much fun. These are all upgrades. These are comics I bought like 40 years ago when I was buying thousands and thousands of comics at a time when I'd go to conventions in New York City or Chicago. And sometimes they would not, here I am, sometimes they would, because I'm not that concerned about condition, or partly that, and because I'm buying them in big lots, 3 for $1. These are, I won't bother to show these real close, but these are ones that I needed in better shape. Now, these are the bad shape ones. So you can see, it's not too bad, right? But it's got a few more wrinkles than I wanted. That's a Dell 4-color comic, number 436, The Brownies. This is not one you should challenge me with, because not only do I have it, I've currently got 2 of them. I Love Lucy comics. That's another 4-color, 535. It's got a crease in it. See, it's not that bad as here. I got to catch it right, just right with a light, so it doesn't. Little Beaver comics. No cracks, no smart cracks. This is also a 4-color. Gosh. Another couple of 4-colors here. This Little Beaver was the Red Rider's sidekick, newspaper strip. Here's there's another Brownies comic. Yeah, the Brownies. See, you can see some, here's an L written on the cover and some wrinkles. Yeah, here.
Maybe while you're looking at those anyway, here is something that might fall into that same category.
Look at this. Wait, look at this. Isn't that a nice cover? That's a Zane Grey. This is an original, something original. Well, it's licensed from Zane Grey, but see the artwork? It's a wash cover. I'm not sure exactly how that's done, but it's not, it's like a painting. So these are discarded. Anybody wants to drop by, you can have these. I can sell them for not much. So what were you saying?
Maybe from that same category, it sounds like it. Does Don maybe have John F. Kennedy Dell one-shot from 1964?
Oh, did you say the Dell John Kennedy one-shot from 1964? Dell Comics up here. Dell Comics. GHI. Well, say something else. Keep entertaining everybody. Recite poetry, Jano.
I'm not. There he is.
Not only do I have it, Dun, 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 dun. It's the first one in the box.
Ah, perfect.
Well, I have to prove that I've got it, not just a. Let's see, this is in not good shape. This maybe is on my upgrade list because I'm certainly a John F. Kennedy fan. Greatest, well, I was about to say greatest president in my lifetime, but I don't know. You got Obama, so. All right, 2 challenges won.
Okay, maybe in the meantime,
Yeah.
somebody asked, does Don like Alan Moore comics? Do you know Alan Moore comics? Do you read Alan Moore comics?
Those I don't have any anymore. It's not really the sort of comics I like. I did like the idea. I'm so unsure of myself now. He did the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was great. The movie stunk, but that was a really clever idea. I like that. Maybe not. And didn't he do Swamp Thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess I do. The thing I like the most was his Death of Superman, his ending to the Superman legend, which was a completely not like any other Alan Moore script I remember reading. I was sorry to get rid of those original comics. I have them in the trade paperback reprints. But this was what year was this? 80s. DC, just like they do nowadays, practically once a year, had to restart the characters because they're not selling. They had to recreate them for the next generation of readers. And up until 1985, well, John Byrne gave it a small, or was this right before the John Byrne period? Anyway, they had to end the original Superman legend for all of us old Superman fans and out of respect to the character, because the character it was the same character developed slightly from the late 30s up until whatever date this was when Alan Moore. What was the name of the story? The
Whatever happened to the Man of
Man
Tomorrow?
of Tomorrow, yeah. But you'd think he'd do something really grotesque or violent or swamp thingy or something, but it was so sweet. He brought all of the outstanding plot threads of the Superman legend together and ended it. It's been a long time since I read it, but I think Clark Kent marries Lois Lane and they go off to live. And this, if I had ever gotten around, well, I would have never gotten around to it because nobody would have ever published it. But if I'd ever ended the Uncle Scrooge legend like he did for Superman, I would have followed his lead. And I would have done something just like that. But there's no point in it. Nobody would have published it. So Alan Moore is not bad and sometimes brilliant.
Okay, what are your
Ask me
thoughts?
about some comics that I've still, this is a collection, 1946 to 70. Ask me about the.
More general question.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on using comic books for education on different levels from primary schools to even universities? When I was in the US, I was very surprised that comic books are in college libraries.
You were surprised that comics were in college libraries?
That's what he says.
Not in the college I went to, but of course that was 40 years ago. I don't know. I don't know anything about. I remember when I was a kid or even a teenager, comic books were regarded as something that parents should not let children read. And teachers would try to talk kids out of reading comic books, which is idiotic, of course, patently idiotic. I remember the books they tried to get me to read when I was in grade school were not interesting. They were classics. They were dull. They were written over my head, I guess. They were boring because first you have to teach a kid to enjoy reading, and you teach him to enjoy reading by reading something he enjoys. And then he can move on to what the teacher thinks is more sophisticated. I'm not sure if it is. It just looks more appealing to the teacher. Now, what they do nowadays, I don't know, so I can't have an opinion on that. I never thought that comics were ever became part of the educational system, and I certainly don't know how it is in Europe. I had never seen comics in a library until I was in Europe in a public library. Of course, our comics are flimsy. Comics in Europe are in are albums. You know, they got some substance to them. You can't put American comics in a library because they never come back. They get torn to. Now, of course, I'm sure the comics the guy's talking about are albums. We didn't have comic albums in the 60s. That started sometime in the 80s. So that's one reason you can't put American comics in the library is because they're these flimsy, skinny little magazines on cheap paper. So I don't know.
Okay, here is a Barks related question, but not to the comics. Everybody knows that you love Barks Scrooge comics. What do you think about his other adult works, such as the Calgary Eye Opener pinups and stuff?
Well, about all I've seen of that. Here, it's right here. The Unexpurgated Carl Barks, published by, who was that, Gemstone or Gladstone? Hamilton Comics. Oh, he didn't. This is the stuff that if people who don't, oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Politically incorrect, right, folks? A product of their time. It's because of this brilliant work that makes his artwork and his sense of humor so unique on his Duck comics. This is where it began. It's witty, it's wry, it's weird. I had a friend, I think one of the foremost funny animal cartoonists in America. And he grew up loving all of the funny animal comics that I wasn't crazy about. My sister had them. I'd look at them, but he loved all of those. And where most people would call, as everybody's heard the story, they would differentiate Barks's art. We didn't know his name, but we would call him the good artist. This friend of mine would call him the weird artist. And it was. You could see this kind of art style in his Uncle Scrooge comics. And you'd only, in the other funny animal comics, you'd see Disney art style or Walter Lantz art style or Warner Brothers art style. But it's because of this stuff that we can thank for the great Uncle Scrooge stories. Because they were a little bit for adults. It's funny, like certain things are just within arm's reach here. But of course, I think I've got one that I found at a junk store years ago. It wasn't a Calgary Eye Opener, but I think Marx did the cover to it. Was it called hooey? So, you know, that's 1920s expression. That's a lot of hooey. That's like Mad Magazine. All right, what's next?
Okay, here is something related to your the license plates, because for us here in Europe, it's very strange that you can just have any
license plate.
Yeah.
But
So
why not? It's a way to raise money without raising taxes.
so can you quickly explain how it works?
You request any license plate you want, as long as it's not vulgar or obscene, obviously, and they give it to you. Used to be I'd get a new one each year. Now they give me stickers, but I guess I've got enough of them. They go all the way. I gotta remember, I've got a camera, I should show it. 1978. I had a choice, comics or McDuck. And I picked comics. But in 1978, I never knew I'd have anything in particular personally to do with Scrooge McDuck. Comics is still good. And what's the last one? 2017. And now the one I've got on my 48 Dodge is just got a sticker on it. That's all right. So they don't do that in Europe. Well, license plates are a different shape in Europe, aren't they? They're long and narrow,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yes.
they're designed just strictly for like a serial number for a car identification.
Hmm.
Not so in America. In America, they're big and they have pictures on them. And so in Kentucky, I don't know about other states, you can have all sorts of different pictures. You can have pictures of horses, of course, pictures of animals, pictures of things you believe in, like adopting children or saving animals, or it's a statement. There was one here, 1 year. That's right. Yeah, the statement. This wasn't what I picked. This was. See, it's a sun, a dawn. I guess it's a dawn, but you can't see it. But and my M just happened to cover it up. You know, in other license plates, you could see the whole sun, but there was a smiley face on the sun. So I used yellow paint to get rid of the smile in the one eye. The smiley faces on my license plate is no, I couldn't take that. A license plate question. Very good. Don't we need a comic book challenge now so I can have some fun?
Yeah, just a second, because I see
Yeah,
another one. What do you think about today's prices in the comic book market for vintage comic books?
oh, it's taken over by investors. Collectors are gone. I just said a minute ago, I'd love to have, what was the comic I said? I mentioned a comic that I could have had for $1.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Now I can get it for 10. I can get it anytime I want for 10,000. I'm not going to pay that much for a used comic book. That's not any fun. But see, I collect comics because I love having comics, a complete collection. It's a challenge it used to be a challenge to hunt down these things that nobody else cared about, and you'd have to look and you'd have to travel and you'd have to go through flea markets and junk stores and you had to fill out a collection. It was fun. It was a challenge. Now I can have any comic I want if I just want to pay the money. And I could if I put money in the bank. I put money in retirement accounts. That's how they put it in comics. Other people invest in gold. Other people invest in stocks. These people who are paying this money, they don't care about the comics. That's why they put them in plastic slabs that can't be opened. They don't give a damn about the comics. They're just building a portfolio of value, which is fine. But it ruined my hobby for me. I still wish comics were. The only reason I wouldn't want them to be half cover price is because nobody would deal in them, and I'd have to go back to finding them on my own, like I did back in the late '60s. It's nice to go to a comic dealer, and I still can go and flip through the comics that aren't in perfect condition. And even not all the ones in the slabs are in perfect condition by any means. People who own them just saw the only reason to own them is to resell it for more, so they sealed it up in a slab. Lots of my dealer friends I go to, I'll look through all their comics. They're in plastic bags and they're many boxes, and then they'll say, "Here we are. Here's the slab comics over here. Don't you want to look at those?" And I say, "Well, no, they're dead. They've been killed. I like living comics." Once in a great while, I'll buy a slab comic if they. Of course, the thing is, when they're slabbed, the price goes up further because it costs money to put them in a slab. But I have been known to buy a slab comic, but they're easy to open. Crack it open, cut it open, and release the comic back into the wild. Keep him coming, Jano. He's
Okay.
probably reading. He's looking for.
Yeah. Hi from Spain. I don't know if it's valid because it's from Spain, but it sounds like it could be valid. Challenge. Hi from Spain, Don. Do you have Panic #2? I'd like to see the Alf Hellstein cover.
This I would be suspicious of these challenges because they're right here. Obviously, this has been set up in advance, right? Mad Panic #4. Okay, and I'm going to challenge myself in a minute. There's Panic #1. All right, another second. You see, I got them crammed into this box. I don't really care about the keeping the seat in bed. Al Feldstein cover, yeah. Why? How does the? Well, I guess you can't ask him. I'm wondering why he. See, okay, that's another rule. If you just want to see a cover, but that's a good challenge, though. But if you just want to see a comics cover, Google it. If this guy from Spain just Googled Panic Number 2, he'd have 30 or 40 images of the Panic Number 2. So I'd rather they weren't using me just to see a cover. However, I'll continue this challenge a moment. Somebody wrote in to the group page, and they said I wrote all the rules, and this person didn't seem to realize the idea is that you do it live. You don't send in your request. But he wanted to see a copy of Mad number 73, Mad Magazine number 73, because he wanted to see the back cover. And of course I said, well, you have to make this request live. And then while I was waiting to go on, I'm thinking, why does he want to see the back cover? So I had to dig it out, and it's laying right here. The reason he wanted to see the back cover is this is the front cover. What's this thing here? It's blocking the picture. So, warning, do not look at the back cover of this magazine. This is for when magazines were sold on newsstands. Well, I guess they still are, but this is not for somebody who had a subscription. And the back cover is this. The Alfred E. Newman hex sign, and there's all sorts of bad luck symbols. So once you look at it, if you do not buy it for your own, you die. So that's why he wanted to see the back cover of Mad number 74. However, if he wanted to, I'm sure if he Googled Mad number 74 back cover, it would have popped right up.
Okay, want to look?
Got me curious, so I dug it out.
Want to look for another one?
Yes.
Do you have Baffling Mysteries, number 25 from 1955?
Wow, that's good. That's good. All right, what's the company? Baffling Mysteries. Baffling Mysteries. See, I completely forget that I have a broken toe. I'm getting so excited about showing off these comics. Some of these are in this box so tight, they're going to pull some out. What number was it?
25.
What's the month?
It only said 55. 1955.
Because the numbers aren't on the covers. All right, I'll have to count this. Daggone it. That's the Beyond. All right, this is going to take too long. The Beyond, Baffling. Just one more second. I'll just have to show them all to you. But you have to have proof which one is number 55, right? Or 25.
25.
All right. Didn't want to do this. The Beyond. All right, there's Baffling Mysteries. Gonna have to open it. $25.
Mm-hmm.
I can't prove it. Oh, Jano, you said you were going to look them up on the
I can.
internet.
One moment.
That's what you're supposed to be doing when I'm fumbling around trying to dig it out. That should be number 25 because it's this was number 26 that I opened, and I've got a whole set. see, this is October, and that is July. I think I'm going to have to check, aren't I? Is there anybody watching?
Moment, I pull up the proof. I think I have the proof here. Baffling Mysteries 25. Can you show it again into the camera, Don? Yes, looks like the one here. Yes.
Okay, that was an excellent challenge, but next time only pick comics that have the numbers on the cover. This was a company that didn't put the numbers on the cover.
Okay,
excellent
challenge. Here is a random non-comic.
Oh, hey, right, I got to show this.
Okay.
This is a classic comic, and it was right on top of the stack. One of my favorites, Atomic War. I remember before they had price guides, and we never knew all the comic books that were ever published. When we go to a comic convention, flipping through boxes of miscellaneous comics, we never knew what was going to come up next. And I remember in 1970 in New York City, when I was flipping through a box, and it came up with that comic of an atomic bomb going off in New York City and the Empire State Building melting and the Chrysler Building falling over. That was so great. And then Atomic War number 2. How could there be a number 2? Looks like bombing a submarine. But then issue 3. We'll plant this H-bomb right in the Kremlin and avenge what the Reds did to New York, Chicago, and Detroit. Bombs away! Oh, and there's still, the war went on still. This is boring. Just some sort of super plane. Okay, thank you. What were you about to say? Look at that. Boom. Oh, there's the Chrysler buildings right here. All right. Put this away while you're...
Random non-comics question. Did Don's family business ever do tile work in the Louisville Gardens? Does he have a favorite memory of the gardens?
I don't know what it is. Is that where they had like boxing events and things like that? Maybe basketball games?
Could be. I have no idea.
No, my father never took me anywhere. He never went out. And I was never a sports fan, so that's what Louisville Gardens is. Now, did we do work in it? We probably did all the bathrooms when they first built it. I think that's been around since, I don't even know. But we did all the biggest hotels, convention centers. We did those. The Kino Rosa, tile and terrazas. We even did the, some people see the Scrooge McDuck money bin blueprints. We did the tile work in there. It says so on the blueprints. Although we'd never traveled from Louisville all the way out to California to do jobs like that. That was an excellent comic book challenge.
Okay, question about your cars. Do you use your Dodge as an everyday drive, or do you have a normal car as well?
No, for decades, I used the Dodge on the work site. When I was driving around the city, checking work sites or going to work on work sites, I was driving a 1948 Dodge. You'd be in the building under construction, out in the middle of a dirt field before they'd even done any paving, and here comes a 48 Dodge bumping across the ground. That was my only car. I bought it in 1978, and I've still got it. I am not comfortable with driving it because there's something wrong with the brakes. I'm going to have that looked at. And because of that problem, I hadn't driven it in a couple of years, and I'm really ashamed of that. And I'm halfway to restoring its usage because I had basically the same problem with the 38 Nash, which is not the Dodge I had a couple of years longer. So that's my baby. The 38 Nash is pretty flashy looking. Looks like a LaSalle, and it's painted silver. And so just 3 or 4 months ago, I had that completely refurbished. It already had a new engine in it. I'd replaced the engine some years ago. But it also had a problem with the brakes, but I had the brakes redone and everything else the guy could find. And so pretty soon, when the weather gets a little nicer, I'm going to be driving that all around town. Now, does the family have another car for normal use? Yes, my wife has an SUV. And of course, when we're going out to the grocery, well, not always. On a nice day, I would take the Dodge out. But if we're going for a big load of groceries or going to the hardware store for some equipment, of course, we'll use the SUV. Sometime we'll shall we do a live stream from out in the expo center, the barn. We call it the expo center because this house previously belonged to an Oldsmobile dealer. Speaking of cars, the son of an Oldsmobile dealer, and he had this huge outbuilding, not a barn. It's just a big metal. No, it's wood outbuilding, and it was so big that we called it the Expo Center because I'd never have enough stuff to fill it up. And of course, now I guess I do. That was before I bought 3 tractors and a pop-up trailer and canoe and tiller and the 2 antique cars. Now all that stuff barely fits in there. What was the question? I don't remember. Oh, do I actually have a normal car? I personally don't. I like when I have to fill out. I would drive the car around, go to a hotel. On trips and overnight trips, we'd take the Dodge. And on the hotel form, they say fill out your license plate and your car make and model. And I put the license plate, comics, strange enough, and then to fill out Dodge. And they'd look at it and say, yes, it's a Dodge, but what's the model? And I said, well, it's a Dodge. That's all they made. In 1948, they made a Dodge. And the people. Any other questions about cars?
Not that I see any,
That was
but
a good question. Yeah.
general question: what are your main interests at the moment besides comics?
It's definitely the nature preserve, and especially right now. I just spent a couple of weeks working hard to finish up the last batch of art commissions that Stefan had lined up for me and get those completely out of the way. And now I hope that'd be done and I can start concentrating on mowing and clearing trails. But now I need to concentrate at least one more week before the deadline on this Ultimate Life of Scrooge book because we want to do as good a job we can. The time ran out on them. They got caught in the Christmas deadline. And trying to think of as many improvements as possible. And I'm constantly finding more improvements. I'm asking them to change the font on a lot of titles. We completely redid the covers. Thinking, what's that? I don't want to say too much. I don't think they'll object to me saying the blueprints. The money bin blueprints will now be a fold out. It's going to be like 2 feet wide and a foot tall. Not quite, but. And this is the 1-sheet blueprint. In the comic books, it was a 2-sheet blueprint because being a comic book, I had to do it. Blueprints were a landscape style. So I had to mock up some fake portrait style blueprints to fit on 2 pages of the comic books. But when the Don Rosa Library wanted to use it as a nice 2-page spread where the crease would, the gutter, it's called, and you could see the whole thing. And even though you'd have this gutter in the center, you'd see the whole thing. And I said, well, I did Dan Shane, the guy who actually drew the blueprints on a computer, to my design elements. He had done a 1-sheet landscape style for the Gothenburg Book Fair in 2001, in October 2001 or late September. And they were going to give it away and I was going to sit there and sign them. So he designed one for them, and then it was never produced because I couldn't go. there were no planes flying in September and October 2001. So I'd forgotten about this, but I knew he had it, and they had it at Egmont. And so I suggested, well, there's a one-page blueprint for you can use in the DRL. And I stupidly, with checking everything else, there's so much to check, I didn't check the blueprints. And they told me they were going to use it as a fold-out. So finally, I checked the blueprints, and they're incorrect. They are done European style, in the sense that, first of all, there were mistakes in the notes, but the main problem was the floors were numbered European style, meaning there was the ground floor on the ground and then the first floor. And we don't get that. I don't think all European countries do this, but that makes no sense at all to me. There is a floor on the ground, and it's the first floor. The next one up is the second floor, because the first floor is down there. It's the first floor being not the first floor. So that had to be changed, because the comics, the blueprints, according to the story, were done by somebody in Calisoda, California. So I had to have all of the labels on the floors changed. And like I say, there was some other labels. For one thing, the Kino Rosa company wasn't mentioned. So I want to get that back in there. See, because they had 2 pages with 2 notes on each page, but when he turned it into one sheet, combining the 2 pages, he only used 2 of the 4 notes. Anyway, that's the type of thing we're still trying to correct for this ultimate Life of Scrooge. Did I answer a question? What was the question? Is anybody still there? Hello?
The question, yes.
Where'd you go, Jano?
I accidentally muted myself and I didn't realize it.
I accidentally muted myself.
The question was if what your interests are in general at the moment.
How did I get off on the blueprint?
I have no idea.
That's the way I am. It's the spring cleanup. I've already tilled the garden. We got to start planting. I got to wash the windows. That's a huge job. I only do that every 2 or 3 years, and I skipped last year because I was too busy working on the trails. I got to go out and wash all the windows. I have to do that myself. There's jobs that I won't let anybody do for me because I do it best. It's terrible being that way, but and then we have to go out and clear the trails so I can start mowing those, because all winter long limbs are falling on the trails. And there's a whole section of land in the northeast that the trail that I put in there has fallen into ruin in the last 15 years. So we've got to go through there carefully and clear away all the debris and see if I can still find where the trail is. Because there's no fun living in 30 acres and not being to take a stroll through the entire 30 acres. But that's a whole section of land that they haven't been able to walk around in for years now. It's outside the fence is the main reason. The place was already fenced in, and then I bought some adjacent land for a barrier, a buffer zone between me and the rest of the world, which is why I live out here, or at least the rest of Kentucky. So that's why it easily fell into disrepair, because it's not part of you have to go through a gate to get to it, and the dogs can't go there. So, but that's normally my main job, is taking care of the 30 acres, going on camping trips. I plan my camping trips out 6 months in advance, so I always have the best campsite in the campground. We had to cancel a trip to Okefenokee Swamp, a canoe camping trip, twice now for various reasons. Actually, it's been like 6 times I've had to cancel it over the last 5 years. But we've planned that for next winter, early winter, when the weather's even better. It's down south. So planning camping trips, taking care of the 30 acres, which is a bigger job than you can guess, but I like it. Keeping track of people publishing Don Rosa libraries around the world, making sure they're using all the newest uh, updates and changes and improvements and corrections, and making sure that they tell me when they publish them and eventually send me copies. Right now, apparently there was another Life of Scrooge, a real cheap edition in Italy, and nobody's sending me a copy. I think I'm not going to like it when I see it. Somebody showed me a copy of the cover, and the Scrooge it's the King of the Klondike cover where he's holding a gold nugget up, and his beak looks green. I don't know. But anyway, and this is what publishers do. This is people are disappointed. This is a real cheap version, but the expensive version comes out next year. I don't get involved in the publishing business. You might think that, on one hand, you might think, well, why don't they publish the expensive one first and then let the people with a lot of money buy that, and then publish the cheaper one next, and then the cheaper one? But they can't do it that way. That would be nice. I wish they could, but they can't, because first they have to see if somebody will buy the cheaper one. And then they say, oh, well, that sold pretty good. Well, let's do a better one, and maybe some people will buy that. People buy that. They say, well, that sold pretty good. Well, let's do the best one we possibly can for a lot of money. But the point is, if it's too much money, don't buy it. Nobody's forcing anybody to buy it, but they have to do it that way. Otherwise, they'll go broke if they publish like this Ultimate Life of Scrooge. If they $250, if they did that one first and found out not a single person was crazy enough to pay that much, that's disaster. How did I get on this subject? What am I doing?
I have no idea again.
That's the way I am. All right.
Maybe different topic. Tell us about chilies versus peppers.
Did I tell the story about why people mistakenly call chilies peppers? Did I tell that last time?
I don't recall.
Okay. Chilies versus peppers, and why they're called chilies, or do I like to?
Because why you prefer writing them with the E and stuff?
Oh, that's different. If you agree it's called a chili, I write it with an E because that's the Spanish version. But people in America don't like that, because in America that would mean child. In Spanish, it's chili. I can't remember why the country is called Chile. That's something completely different. But I write it with an E because that's the proper Spanish way to write it. If Americans don't know how to read foreign words, that's not my problem. Is that all he wanted to know? I bet it's not. He wanted to know why you shouldn't call them peppers.
Probably, yes.
All right. It's exactly the same reason and the same cause that currently it's very improper to call Native Americans Indians. And how did that start? The same reason, by the same guy who causes chilies to be called peppers. He was a liar. He was a con man. I love him. He's one of the great nutball geniuses of all time. And I'm talking about Christopher Columbus. The reason he got funding to go on this, what everybody thought was a crackpot idea of sailing west and reaching the Orient, nobody wanted to fund it until he finally went to Spain. Now, Spain, as you know, is the furthest western tip of Europe. The furthest distance away from India. India is where pepper came from. Pepper trees, bushes, the stuff you grind, peppercorns, I'm sorry. And that, in those days, spices were like diamonds. The richest people, the kings and queens, wanted salt and pepper and all of this. That's called the spice route. That's why it was called the spice. This was like dealing in precious metals. Spain could never get any pepper because they were the last stop on the route from India. So they wanted to pay for Christopher Columbus's voyage so he could sail west and discover India and bring them back pepper. That's what they wanted. If he saw a little gold on the way, no, okay. But pepper was what they wanted. So he sailed there, and he discovered the New World. He discovered the West Indies, and the natives, the Caribs, brought him these fruits that grew everywhere, and they told him they were chilies, but he tasted they were hot, and pepper was hot. So he returned to Spain, and I don't know if he was. He knew he had not been in India, and he knew he wasn't bringing back pepper, but he told the King and Queen of Spain that he had been to India by sailing west, and the Indians gave him pepper, and he gave him chilies. And for that reason, all over Europe, all over the world, the citizens of the New World were called Indians, and what Columbus brought back to Spain was called peppers. But there were neither Indians nor peppers. Now, there's been a big outcry, justifiably, why the Native Americans should be called Native Americans, or the Caribs, or the Apache, or whatever actual name their people have. But nobody's defending the chilies. People are still callously calling these chilies peppers, which they aren't. So I'm on a one-man mission to get people to change their idea about how to. It's very politically incorrect and cruel to call chilies peppers. I can tolerate when somebody calls it a chili pepper. He's putting them in the right order. Chili and then pepper in quotes for the uninitiated. But I'll never discuss chilies with anybody like it shows unless they call them chilies. I won't call them peppers because they're not. Now, what should a green pepper be called? It's not a chili. It's not a hot chili. But it's not pepper. So I just don't get into that. I just don't eat. I don't eat green peppers. So it's not an issue with me then.
Okay, here.
Don't even come around to me at the convention and show me a green pepper. I won't look.
I didn't see anything.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
Okay, question from the YouTube comments. Jano, would Don like to tell us about how he met you and how you ended up working together?
Can you tell that story? I don't remember. You just came in from the fringes. Seriously, I don't.
One moment, I have to.
Make something up.
Well, I think the first time we actually met was during the 2000 book fair in Frankfurt, where we were for a signing. But it's not like we really met there. I was just in the queue to get a signature and a sketch.
Yeah.
And I think then I started. Yeah. And because back then it took 2 hours standing in line, but it was still possible to get a sketch. And then
How old were you?
In 2000, I was 15. So,
Okay.
And actually, I'm born in November. Okay, I was 14, close to 15, and then I think about a month later or so, I started the Don Rosa Duckmania website, back when fan pages were still a thing and not everything happened on Facebook. And then I started doing translations for Egmont for the weekly comic books in 2003, and I think even that year I did the first Don Rosa translation because the regular translator didn't have time at the moment, and so my first translation was at the end of 2003 was A Letter from Home, and so that only exists in my translation. And but I think we had
you were translating from the official Egmont script. So.
Yeah. Found
out later those weren't my scripts exactly all the time. They told me they were, but they weren't.
And yeah, I think we had been in contact by email for the fan page every once in a while anyway.
It was developing very gradually.
Yeah, yeah, very slowly, like over 20 years. And then I think the first time I actually met you, like meet you, get to know you in person was in 2006, the next
That's
time
that's
you
when I
were.
actually noticed you, right?
Yeah,
And I did treat you like a green pepper.
what is that? And yeah, and then I think in 2006 I met Stefan also for the first time. That was at the Erlangen Comic Salon in here in Germany
And
because
me,
I
both at the same time at
no
that
no
show.
I met Stefan first because he was, and I didn't know that he was just like an external comic book dealer. I just thought he was one of the weird looking employees at the Egmont booth. I thought, who is that weird guy at the Egmont booth? But anyway, I asked there when the next Don Rosa tour would be because I noticed that you hadn't been in Germany for quite a while, because the last time I met you was in 2000, and I don't think you have been in Germany between 2000 and 2006. And so I asked, and they said like, yeah, this fall we will try to do a tour in October. And yeah, that happened. And I joined the tour, but only in Frankfurt for the book fair. And I had some people on the German comic forums, and I collected some pre-orders for this limited edition Life and Times leatherbound book that Stefan did back then.
Yeah.
And yeah, then I joined you at the book fair. And because usually actually Stefan was supposed, it's basically like it's still today, Stefan was supposed to be there and talk with people and sell stuff. And but of course Stefan wasn't there, so you were sitting there alone because Stefan was in the back talking to people from Egmont and having a good time. And then
Or he's out having a massage.
yeah, or a smoke or something.
Yeah, and I'm still
And
working away.
yeah,
Oh, okay,
uh,
but you should tell me this when I'm giving my long answers. That's enough. Look,
yeah.
it's already quarter after three, two.
No, but
I feel like we've been here for 15 minutes.
no, but
So
yeah, that,
anyway, this guy, along with Stefan Brenner,
yeah,
I, I couldn't do a thing without these guys. They run the show.
and yeah,
Yeah,
so
Jano
that
runs the
that developed
Facebook
over
page.
time.
Yeah, it's a hoot, and we're going to go back to doing that again. You think maybe this end of this year? You think
Mm, I think realistically, maybe
next
not
year?
before next year.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. More questions or challenges?
Okay, I don't know if it's a valid one, but do you have Blue Beetle number 56 from May 1948?
No. The end of the superhero runs from the early 40s, they were petering out in 1948, 1947. So I don't collect those. There's no sense in having like the last couple of issues. So I've never tried to get plus Blue Beetle comics are very valuable, very expensive. So any superhero comic that started like in the late 30s, early 40s, and ends right around 1947, 48, I'm not going to have one of the last issues. Otherwise, I'd certainly have Shadow comics. I'm a big Shadow fan, but the Shadow started up in around 1940 and it ended in 19. I've got like one or two Shadow comics. So no, I guess that's a legitimate, according to my rules, that's a legitimate challenge, and I'm whipped. I do not have. I've got all the Blue Beetle comics since then, but no, but not the last or any of the Golden Age Blue Beetle comics. I lost that challenge.
Ah, too bad, too bad.
Give me another one. You have to give me one
Um,
else.
yeah, while I look for more challenges, here's another question. Have you ever been to Dawson City yourself?
No, I did the last cruise I took before I decided that was hell on earth. Um, I went up the Inland Channel, is it called, from Seattle or actually Vancouver up to Skagway and got off and walked around Skagway. But to get to Dawson, you'd have to make a trip up the I think the railroad, the old railroad that they have for tourists that goes up by the Chilkoot Pass. No, let's see, is that the Duryea Pass? There is a lack of historical accuracy in that there's Dawson, there's Skagway, and there's the Chilkoot Pass. But if you went to Skagway, you didn't go through the Chilkoot Pass. That was someplace else. You went up another path. No, I've never been to Skagway. I mean to Dawson City. And by the way, I thought I caught somebody doing this last week. He said he'd gone, he'd hiked up the Chilkoot Pass because he wanted to see Scrooge's Alaska. And I thought the guy was making another of these. It's like the Mandela effect. I meet so many people who think the Yukon and the Klondike are in Alaska. And of course, they're in Canada. They're in the Yukon Territory of Canada. But then I realized that the Chilkoot Pass, at least the beginning of it, where the guy may have hiked, is in Alaska. It's in the little strip of Alaska that's, I don't know how the main part of Alaska is here, and then there's a little, let's see, I'll do it backwards, a little tiny strip going along, which is where Skagway is. So in order for somebody to hightail it up from San Francisco or Seattle, trying to get to the Yukon, he'd have to cross over a little tiny tail of Alaska. So if the guy said he was going up the Chilkoot Pass to experience Scrooge's Alaska, I guess he's right. But if he went past there, he'd be in Scrooge's Canada. So did you find me a challenge?
No, many more challenges coming in. I see a few questions, but in general,
okay. Well, that's what they want.
Okay,
we're not here to entertain me.
Okay, somebody, I think we covered this at some point, but they seem to be interested in it. This has probably been answered before. What did the High Lama mean when he said, "Tralala still conceals part of Huey, Dewey, and Louie's destiny"?
There's no reason to answer that. You have to look at where all has it been published? The Don Rosa Library and the Don Rosa Collection. And I don't answer questions about that. You read the page and you decide for yourself. That's the whole point. It's like asking me what was in the letter that Scrooge never opened in Hearts of the Yukon. You have to decide for yourself what was in the letter. What happened in the cabin when Wyatt Earp and Matt Masterson and Judge Roy Bean were up on the hill listening? What happened in the cabin? You have to decide for yourself. All right, that was a short answer.
Okay, you spoke in a previous episode about first and second sleep. Can you elaborate what you meant by that?
When I got out of college, I went to work for the Kino Rosa Company doing manual labor. I started from the bottom. I had a degree in civil engineering, but I started from the lowest level of labor, pushing wheelbarrows, carrying hods, unloading trucks. And when I got home is when I wanted to write my fanzine articles or read my comics or draw my fanzine comics. And I was too tired. So what I do was when I got home, I took a nap. And I'd get up later in the evening and I'd do all the important things in life. And then I'd go to sleep a second time. And I started that in like mid-70s, 1974 probably. And it was very nice. I liked it. I still do it to this day, and different times have changed. I mean, the exact time of day. But I found out that they're called anthropological historians have determined by reading ancient texts that this is the way everybody on Earth, supposedly, slept up until the invention of gas and especially electric lights. People would eat their dinner or their supper, and the sun went down, so they'd go to sleep. There was nothing else to do. And then they would wake up in the middle of the night, and that's when poets would write their great poetry, and that's when people would make love and make babies, and that's when many of the most important things were done. That's maybe when writers, if they had a good gaslight, or painters probably had to work during the day, but anyway, so this was how the world operated. People had the first sleep, and then they had something the anthropological historians call the watch period. And I'm not sure what that means, but I think maybe it's when it was your turn to go watch on the tower walls for the Huns or the barbarians. And then you would have second sleep. This is what people say, why there's so many people who have trouble sleeping, because you're really not meant to sleep all in one 8 or 9 hour shift, and it's difficult. Of course, in modern times, you can't have any sort of social life if you have first and second sleep. I never had a social life, so that didn't bother me. And I really loved being up, even after I got married, get up in the middle of the night and do all the other things. That's when I read, that's when I would draw, that's when I would answer, get on the internet, answer lots of emails. That's when I would watch DVDs and BDs. And I like being by myself. I'm one of these people who I like being alone. I don't even want to be with my wife all the time. There's people like this. Is it antisocial? It's just a way. I grew up very much alone. I'm very comfortable being alone. So I really like having a time of the day when it's like there's nobody else in the world except me, and I'm alone. It appeals to me. So what? Technically now, I'll eat a lovely dinner about 7:30 or 8 o'clock at night, depending on. It's a little earlier in the winter, a little later in the summer because it's nice to be outside, eat outside. I'll go to sleep about 8:30, 9 o'clock p.m. I'll wake up anywhere from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. Sometimes I sleep too long, had too good a dinner, but between 2 and 3 o'clock. And then I'm up for 3 or 4 hours doing all those things I mentioned, reading, having a midnight snack at usually about 4 a.m. In fact, that's when I eat most of my chilies. During my midnight snack, I'll eat 7 or 8 of them at a time. Well, I eat them all day long, but I eat lots of them then. That's when I can enjoy them the most. Plenty of time to savor their heat and their flavor. Like I say, read and watch the DVDs that I buy. And then I'll go to sleep. It's gotten to be like right at 6 a.m. And I'll sleep for about 2.5 hours in bed. The first sleep, my longer sleep, which is sometimes, it's like 6 hours, I do it in a lounge chair, kind of like this. And then for 2.5 hours, I sleep in bed. And that's a total of 8 or 9 hours, probably 9 hours. So it's plenty of sleep. And it annoys my wife. She has trouble sleeping, like so many people do. And it really bugs her that when I put my head down for my first or second sleep, I'm asleep instantly. That's one of the benefits. So that's first and second sleep.
Okay,
Try it and like it, but it's difficult for a normal person with a normal life to do that. I can see how difficult it would be. Impossible, I guess.
Should we try another challenge?
Ready.
Okay, first of all, we should once again point out that this is a obscure challenge because people keep writing in Uncle Scrooge
See,
from
yeah,
1954. So,
just ignore those.
yeah.
They just don't get it. They're not paying attention.
Okay, but maybe this one might be an obscure one.
You've had some excellent ones so far. So.
Yeah. What about Uncanny Tales #2 from 1952?
That's great. Not #1, #2. Sorry. That's an atlas, a marble atlas. Yeah, okay. World of Mystery, Uncanny Tales, #2. That's the only time in my life I get to show off this collection. Uncanny Tales #2. Get back there. let's see, Western gunfighters. Western, oh, Western, wait a minute. It's not the right one. What did I do? How embarrassing. It's 21 on. Ouch. Okay, out of place. Okay, we're running out of time and I'm wasting it. This box was out of place. 1788. Okay, find the number. Where's the number? Are you looking it up?
Yes.
Because there's no number on the cover.
Okay, let me pull it up first. One moment. I have it here.
Oh, Joe Manili cover.
Okay, I think if I have the right one, it should look like... moment, it should look like this. Does yours look like this too, Don?
Like which?
One moment. Yes, perfect.
Honey cave, but there's no Atlas Comics had the numbers on the covers, but not the early ones apparently. Where's the first one with a number? Wow, I don't see a number still. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, that was excellent. I like the number 2 business. That's cute.
Okay, here is another question.
Yeah.
A long question. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg always said that they were waiting for the right script to finally make the 4th installment of Indiana Jones, which didn't turn out so well then. According to them, the major problem was to find the right MacGuffin after the 3 previous movies. So was there any MacGuffin that you would like to have used in a Scrooge story, but it showed up to be impossible in the end to write about it?
I've got an answer for that question, I think. I didn't really work on MacGuffins, in a sense, but I would sometimes want to do a sequel to a very favorite. Let me have to put these away while I'm talking so stuff doesn't pile up on me. So I'd want to do sequels to the stories I grew up with, because people enjoyed sequels and I love doing sequels. So one of my favorite comics when I was a kid was The Golden Fleecing. And I sat down and I started trying to work up a plot for The Golden Fleecing. I guess that would be a MacGuffin, the key to the plot. But that's not what I couldn't find. What I couldn't do was treat the harpies as such female stereotypes that Barks did. I just couldn't do it. I don't mind that kind of stuff, just like I don't mind old movies and the way stereotypes are depicted. I like stereotypes. I can't write them myself, but I don't object to them in the right time and the right place. But to depict these great Greek mythological creatures as such insulting stereotypes, I couldn't get into it, so I knew I wouldn't be able to do it justice. And I spent 2 weeks of my own time and then just said, it's not going to work for me. So that's when if that's what you mean, a MacGuffin is, anyway, that's the only time I wanted to do a story, and I couldn't do it because I couldn't come up with I couldn't find it in me to write a character like that and try to get humor out of that sort of a stereotype. I guess that's one answer. I put my uncanny tales back.
Okay,
It's the
another
right place. Yeah.
challenge. Another
Yes.
challenge.
Really?
I am looking through your index into terror, and there are some obscure comics in that index. Even the index itself is obscure.
But you know
Can you
I got those because I
can,
wrote an index. But
but maybe you can't find it. Can you find Weird Terror 1 published by Comic Media?
I don't know how I find these because when I'm walking back here, I'm just guessing where these. This one box contains two different comic companies, their entire output uh, for a decade or so. Both, MF Enterprises. Oh, I got to show these. One of my favorite challenges last time was somebody wanted to see Captain Marvel meets the Terrible Five. They happen to be in the same box. Look at these. I don't even put these in bags. These are the worst comics ever published. Myron Fass, a sleazy publisher named Myron Fass, who did some of the most awful comics in history. He's MF Enterprises. He would usually work for other companies, but so Captain Marvel was a character. They didn't have the right to use the name Captain Marvel, for one thing. See, his power was he'd split apart, and his arm would go punch one guy, and his leg would go kick another guy in the groin, and his other arm would go do I don't know. It's idiotic. Anyway, somebody last time wanted to see Captain Marvel presents the Terrible Five. There's that, and there was 2 issues of that. So we clear up one from last time. Don't even put them in bags. That's interesting. However, this guy wanted to see what?
The number 1.
Okay, of what?
Was it? I have to pull it up again. Weird Terror. Weird Terror
Weird
number
Terror?
1. Mm-hmm.
Have you got it looked up? Because there's
Not
no
yet.
number on this cover.
Okay, let me check.
Don Heck. Don Heck cover. He did, didn't he do the first Iron Man comic? Weird Terror number 1. That's Comic Media Company.
Yes, it's right. Number 1 confirmed.
Yeah. I win again. I love it.
We have a
Yeah.
follow-up to the Dawson question. Thank you for answering about Dawson, and sort of a follow-up about that area. Who's your favorite between Herb, Masterson, and Bean? Asking as Bat Masterson Crane piece.
Let's see. Wyatt Earp. I've been going over the. Gene Barry was Bat Masterson. He was cool. Wyatt Earp. God, I'm drawing a blank. Who was Wyatt Earp? Brave, courageous, and bold. Oh, jeez. I gotta see. All right, so too many names going around in my head, but I know the guy real well. He was good. I like Bat Masterson TV show better. And Edgar Buchanan was Judge Roy Bean, syndicated TV show back in the 50s. I don't think I've ever seen that. It's kind of obscure. So I liked Bat Masterson TV show the best. I don't know what. I actually just watched last night a new BD of Gunfight at the OK Corral with Burt Lancaster as Wyatt Earp. Didn't look a thing like Wyatt Earp. Captain Marvel comics in the same box with.
Okay, here we have a question about your collection in general. What is your holy grail comic? What comic are you looking for the most?
What would that be? There's comics that I'd like to have. All right, I'll give away. I said I had a full set of horror comics. There's one I don't have, and it's the very first horror comic, I think. I'm not sure about that. But it is the first one from Marvel in 1948 or so. It's Captain America's Weird Tales. When superhero comics stopped selling, they turned lots of their superhero comics into horror comics. And like Marvel Mystery or Marvel Comics became, Marvel Mystery Comics became Marvel Comics, horror comics. For lasted another 15 years, I think. I've got all those. Captain America comics did not continue as Weird Tales, but that's the one that I don't have. The only horror comic I don't have. At least that's what I claim. You can challenge me, but I don't have one of those. I could, but I'm not going to pay $10,000 for it. I'm just not. Even if I had $10,000 just laying around, I would not pay it for a used comic book. I'm not going to do that. I'll leave that for the investors. But if somebody were to give me one, I'd complete my, I don't have any Captain America comics from the 40s. I used to have a couple that it would just turn up when I was looking, through garages for the comics that I really wanted, the ones from the late 40s on. I had a Captain America number 2 and 3 that I'd found, and maybe one or two other ones. But I sold them. That wasn't something I collected. But I'd like to have that. There's a Donald Duck. Well, Donald Duck Tells About Kites, a Barks comic. I guess that's the only Barks comic I don't have. I could have it any time. I'm just not going to pay that much money. I'd love for somebody to give me one. Anybody listening who's got a spare one, just let's see, another Holy Grail comic. There's one or two really early, the very first Donald Duck, big, giant, oversized comics. They're not Barks, they're newspaper reprints. I could have those, but I don't look for them because they're newspaper reprints and they're just hard to find. What else would there be? I don't know. That's two of them.
Okay. General question: what's the greatest story you ever read or watched? Doesn't matter if that was a book or short story, a comic book or a movie, just as a story in general.
It's my favorite movie. It's a story. It involved a search for treasure, and it was a comedy. And it was very complex, and it wasn't always, it had serious moments, and it had an unhappy ending. Like Treasure, for instance, Treasure of the Sierra Madre. What makes the story the best is that they don't find the treasure, or they lose the treasure. That's why you notice all my Scrooge adventures, he always loses the treasure, except towards the end, the Templar treasure he kept. That's the hallmarks of a great story. And this had characters, and this movie I'm talking about. It was written by a British man and wife. The man was an American expatriate, but I guess the reason he moved to Great Britain was he knew he understood them better than American humor. What are other aspects that make it so good? It was very complicated. And very well done and very funny. And I guess the main reason, it had all of my favorite TV stars from when I was a kid. These are people you never saw them in movies. They just made TV shows and talk shows. And here they were in a movie and they were characters. Anyway, it's my favorite story and my favorite movie. And It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, made by Stanley Kramer, who usually did very serious movies, like Inherit the Wind and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner and some others. He produced what I think is the greatest fantasy movie ever made, which is not Wizard of Oz. Because Wizard of Oz, I love Wizard of Oz, but it's all cute and cuddly. He produced The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, which was written, and the music was written by Dr. Seuss. It's not Dr. Seuss. He pronounced it Dr. Seuss. And that's such a great fantasy because it's Marxian. It has an edge to it. It's satirical. It's not cutesy. It's brilliant. It's my favorite fantasy. But my favorite now, others' favorite stories or books. The Treasure of the Sierra Madre is absolutely unsurpassable as a story. It's got everything, great acting, etc., etc. I read the book. The book sucks. John Huston made the whole story in this. Other great stories, Citizen Kane. Enough said. It's a brilliant story. Some books I've read that I thought were brilliant that really stand out. I mean, there's lots of them I really love reading, but The Captain from Castile was a great book. They made a movie of it in 1946, but it was such a big book. They only could film like the first half of it. It's Cortez trying to reach Mexico City and conquer the Native Mexicans. Well, they couldn't. If they'd got to that scene, that was such a spectacular battle scene and such an incredible architectural. They couldn't have done it back in 1946, 47. So I don't know what they would have done. I don't know. I need an advance warning on a question like that, but that's a great story is what makes a great movie.
Okay, another question.
Yeah.
I know Don doesn't buy modern comics, but did he at least keep up with the modern Uncle Scrooge or Walt Disney's comics and stories from the last publishers?
I don't keep up with any Disney comics. I'm only interested in Barks comics. I've never really cared for Donald Duck comics or Uncle Scrooge comics or any Disney comics. I've got a full set of them, just out of respect for the name Disney, which I gripe about Disney a lot, but I'm not griping about the Disney, the Walt Disney. I'm griping about modern corporate Disney. But I've never hear that. Well, no, I haven't. I have no idea what's. Jano has me send him. I guess you don't mind me telling people this. Jano buys current American comics, and he sends them sent through me a lot of them because the Americans don't ship overseas, and I just forward them to him or take them to him, and he gets the IDWs. Is that what he's talking about? IDW?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll look at some of the covers on it. What the? All right, here it is. I don't know. I don't deserve an opinion. I'm just not interested in Disney comics. Let me talk about. I read your German site about the German DRL.
On Rosa Library, yeah.
Yeah, and I have to Google Translate it. With German, it works pretty good. Doesn't work so good with Finnish, but German they get it pretty good. And people seem, I think they were maybe watching. Yeah, somebody was watching the live stream, and he was upset that I never have an opinion on these great Italian artists and writers. Well, where am I going to see them? We don't get those comics here. I don't know what he thinks I'm. So I don't know anything about the Italian comics. Maybe he wants me to be interested, but he grew up with them, so he's interested. Why? I don't have an interest in something I never saw, and I'm not going to search it out. And if I did, I couldn't read it. It's in Italian. My father could read Italian, but they're not here. They're talking about all over Europe. You see the Italian comics up north, in Scandinavia, all through Germany, etc. They get them in the digests, and then in Italy they see the Marx comics and the Don Rosa comics and some of these bigger magazines. I don't think they do anymore, but they did at one time. In America, we don't see any of this, or we didn't back when comics really sold well, and the Disney comics were the best-selling comic books in American history. Marx's, outsold Batman and Superman, all that stuff by 10, 20 to 1. I mean, how they're selling now. They outsold them then, and they still outsell. What they sold, like 3 million copies a month. back in those days. There's no American Comics sell anything like that now. So I wander far enough away from the original question that, but we've never got translations of them then when I was at least reading them. So I don't know. I don't know anything about foreign Disney comics, and how could I? I'm not going to read the IDWs. I'm just not interested. I got grass to mow. I've got a collection to build. I got camping trips to plan. I got live streams to do. I got comic book challenges. Give me a comic book challenge. What time is it? Oh, 10 minutes. Do we stop right at 3? Or what's that, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9? We're stopping at 9 o'clock sharp?
Well, we'll look how it works. But here, another question.
There's only 2 people watching. How many people are watching this time? Is it down to like 100?
It's about 186.
Oh, okay. It was 800 the first time we did it.
Okay, during research for stories, did you read something that you wanted to put in a story but could not find the right story to put it into?
Well, no, I wouldn't research. I can't research. What?
If you
I have to have a purpose to do the research. I have to already have a story, and then I research it. I can't do research and then.
Yeah, but maybe you stumbled over some interesting tidbit that might
while
have
I'm doing some other research.
Probably yes.
I don't know, but that's possible. I thought I was getting one of the answers to the questions when I do interviews, or maybe no, it's not interview. I wouldn't treat an interviewer like this, but at a show, and so the guy knows I both write and draw the comics, and he comes up and says, "Oh, you both write and draw the comics?" I said, "Yes, I'm very proud of that." And he says, "Which do you do first? Do you write the comic or do you draw it first?" And I said, "Well, first I draw the comic, and then after I'm done, I look at it and I try to come up with a plot that fits the random drawing." And he said, But later I found out that that's how Marvel comics are done. The artist draws them, but puts a lot of action scenes, and then Stan Lee would come back and fill in the dialogue. So, I don't know.
Okay, challenge.
What?
Challenge.
I'm ready.
Man's Adventures 22 from 1953.
I didn't have War Comics, Atlas War Comics. That's an Atlas War comic. But let me try it. Atlas is, here's Atlas. Atlas. Tell me again the number.
Man's Adventures 22.
Aha! Actually, I have a full set of Men's Adventures because it's Men's Adventures is the title. And sometimes they're not war comics. But at some point...
Well, I pulled it up and it looks like a weird horror comic thingy.
Yes, that's what it is. They're turning Men's Adventures into a horror comic. And let me make sure. 22. Yeah. Here's the number if we...
I'll pull it up too.
There it is.
Yes, confirmed.
Somebody's really thinking. He thought this was a horror comic that I wouldn't have, like Captain America. Captain Alone. Excellent. Men's Adventures. It's a silly title for a vampires getting up. Men's Adventures. Let's see if that was the last issue. Look at this. You didn't know Marvel published Mighty Mouse comics. So, Mighty Mouse is a member of the Marvel superhero family.
We'll see him in a future film, of course.
Men's Adventures 26, and they're still horror comics. See, that's why I collect Men's Adventures. Let's see, yeah. Oh, I got to show you these. That's the sort of adventures I have all the time. That was 25. Let's see if 24. Oh, this is a neat cover. Yeah, number 23. It's stuck to number 24. Look, it's a comic strip on the cover. Let's see. I didn't even look at it.
Here's something that sounds pretty obscure. I don't know if it makes sense.
Go ahead.
Got it. Fat Man, the Human Flying Saucer. Does Don have say issue number 3?
Something's wrong with this. Something funny goes on between these Mylar bags. Sometimes it's like electricity. They stick in some chemical. All right. Now, the problem here is, what's the publisher? That's how I have to locate it.
Okay, Fat Man, the Human Flying Saucer is... published by... let me look it up.
Got it.
Got it?
Oh, that's my sore toe. Except the screwballs who want me to show them an Uncle Scrooge comic. The rest of these are excellent challenges. What's you want? Number 3?
Yep.
This is number 3.
Lightning Comics.
Yeah. This is a comic company that I'd have to research. C.C. Beck had something to do with it. I don't think he owned it, but he was the director of it. It's Lightning Comics after the symbol on Captain Marvel's chest. The lightning bolt. This is the original Captain Marvel, of course, back in the 40s and 50s. So you see it's the same kind of cape. It's drawn by C.C. Beck, so it's like a fat Captain Marvel. And he would turn into a flying saucer? What? This isn't much separated from that other Captain Marvel. Speaking of Captain Marvel, just a silly superhero. And these are comedy superheroes, obviously. The original Captain Marvel is semi-serious. It was like a comedy adventure. So, Fat Man, the Human Flying Saucer. This is, I should have these in the same box as Captain Marvel, who split apart so he could punch and kick people at the same time. What a superhero. But then DC Comics and the Legion of Superhero had Concrete Boy, who, when peril threatened, he would turn into a concrete statue. Oh, a lot of good that would do anybody. Okay, that was another excellent challenge.
Okay, movie-related question. Somebody asks, you said in an earlier live stream that you don't like many new movies or TV shows, but do you watch any comic book-based movies and TV shows like the Marvel Cinematic Universe?
Because I was in the back of the room.
Last time or in a previous stream, you said you don't like many of the new movies and TV shows, but what about comic book movies and TV shows? Do you watch any of the Marvel movies or anything like that?
I don't watch any of the TV shows, period. I don't watch new television. The only thing I watch on television is the morning news on CNN, the evening news on local television and NBC, and the rest of the day the TV is on Turner Classic Movies, just as background. sounds. I've never watched it because I've got all those movies on DVD. So I have no idea what's going on modern television. I don't know if I've ever even tried watching the Marvel TV shows. I just don't have time for new TV shows. Now, I will say that I've seen some of the Marvel movies, and I like the way that at least the earlier ones were done. I had the sense they were done for both the young readers, the adolescents, and their parents. I just got a sense of it because I got a kick out of it. There's lots of references to new things and references to old things. I thought the most interesting one is the Ant-Man movie, where Michael Douglas played the character that I read when I was a kid, that Ant-Man, and now there's a new Ant-Man. Mainly, even when I enjoy those movies, I'm a bigger DC fan, but I don't care for the grim, grisly Batman movies. The Superman movies, all right. I love the first Wonder Woman movie. I'm scared to watch the new one because I'm afraid I won't like it. I never liked any superhero team comic books. I think I've said before, I enjoy individual superheroes of the old-fashioned type, back through the 60s. But when you start throwing them at me in groups, I can't suspend my disbelief anymore. It's silly. So I never read Justice League. I never read Avengers. I never read X-Men. I've got them all. I shouldn't say I never read them. Yeah, I read them when I bought them, but I just let's see what I was going to say. So I don't know if the new the Avengers movies I can't get a hold of. I never watched the X-Men movies. Anyway, you shouldn't ask me these things. My opinion doesn't count. It's not something I'm interested in.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think that maybe wraps up for today because it's
You don't have
one
one
last
more comic
challenge.
book challenge?
Because
No?
if I say it's the end now, then people will be like, "Ah, that rude German guy always stops stuff." But we already said it's only 2 hours.
Okay.
But one last challenge.
Yes.
But I just have to look up if we find something here. Okay.
Here's the TV guides. You got to name any TV guide prior to even into the 2000s.
Okay. Let's do two more. One from Facebook and one from YouTube. Dell Comics. Rudy Kasudi #6.
Not in 4 colors. I may not have that because it's not in the 4 color. All right, all the way back down here. I don't think I'm going to have Rudy Kazudi. I haven't got him. Wait, it's a separate title, right?
I think I have no idea.
I got the 4 color Rudy Kazudis, but this is a separate title. All right, he wins, I guess. If there's a separate Rudy Kazudi title, I never noticed it. What you said there was one more?
Yeah, Dell Comics Dracula #3.
What is it?
Dracula #3 from Dell Comics.
Oh, making sure I don't have Rudy Kazudi. I'm going to check and make sure that Dell Dracula. All right. Somebody's got out a book that is the worst comic books ever published. This is another one. It's drawn by Tony. I can't remember the name of the guy. These are definitely the worst comics. Felix. Here's a full set of Felix the Cat comics. Dracula should be in front of that. There we are, Dracula. Dracula, Dracula, Dracula. Dracula. Okay, the numbers aren't on the covers. I think that's number 1. Unless that's number 1, 2, 3.
Dracula number 3. Let me pull it up quickly.
But if it's not, I've got all the others right here.
I think from what I can see, it's a yellow one with a zeppelin, with a flying saucer.
With a blimp?
Yeah, that's the
That one?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, that would be number 3 if this is number 2. And this is number 1, which is an adaptation of the Universal movie. So Dell had to pay Universal for this, but then after that they continued with their own new character. I can't remember the name of that, but that guy is my choice of the worst comic book artist of at least in the 60s anyway. There were some worse ones back in the 40s and 50s. Okay, so now we're done.
I think that's it for today, yes.
Okay, well, those were excellent comic book challenges.
So
and we didn't have to use a single one left over from last time.
No, I only picked ones posted here in the chat. Okay, I don't remember the list from that you sent around, but I think these were all new ones. So
these were all new. These were excellent. Yeah.
Okay, then.
So thank you. I had a good time.
And I think that wraps up the question, because I don't see any new questions in the chat either, because we're only at about 186 people anyway. But many thousand more people will watch it later on YouTube and on Facebook.
So.
And
but they can't send me a comic book challenge, so that's no fun.
Okay, do we already know from which location we will be streaming next time?
Should be the studio.
Okay.
That's if we take them in the...
Okay, folks, next time we will be coming to you from the studio. Tune in. As usual, you'll find out everything about the exact date on the Facebook page, on Twitter, on Instagram, everywhere.
Unless people would rather do it here. I'd rather do it here. But I don't insist.
And yeah, we'll communicate the exact date and time. And yeah, we will see you then. Have a good evening. Have a good week. Stay safe, stay healthy, and see you then. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Jano, and bye-bye.